As we confront the fallout from the Iran nuclear deal, it is important that we examine two critical networks, and they are two critical criminal networks that stand to gain the most from sanctions relief: the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Iran's proxy, Hezbollah. Made up of at least 150,000 personnel, the Guard Corps is responsible for Iran's external and internal security, including the protection of the key strategic oil waterway, the Strait of Hormuz, the development of Iran's ballistic missile program, and maintaining order and control of the Iranian people. It oversees the Quds Force, the asymmetric war and terror operators of the IRGC, who are behind the deaths of hundreds of American servicemen and women and coalition forces in Iraq, and who continue to plan operations on the ground in Iraq and Syria while undermining our national security interests. The IRGC is Iran's single largest economic actor. It owns the country's biggest construction company, its main telecommunications company, and controls at least 25% of the Tehran Stock Exchange. The IRGC owns and controls banks. Its officials sit on and control the boards of private companies, and it is the primary player in the construction and infrastructure sectors, as well as increasingly the energy sector. Because the IRGC controls so much of the Iranian economy, it is poised to gain billions from the deal and Iran's economic growth. When the administration argues that the Iranian regime will invest its sanctions relief into infrastructure, what they're not telling you is that the IRGC, a terror organization in its own right, will be the ones cashing in on all the infrastructure, all the construction, all the energy projects. Companies are already lining up to do business with Iran, and as the sanctions come off, more money will be funneled to IRGC companies, who will then turn right around and use that money for their nefarious activities. As such a big player in Iran, the IRGC has a vested interest in maintaining its alliance with the regime and ensuring the regime's survival, both inside Iran by maintaining its authority over the people of Iran, but also by continuing to expand regionally and fulfilling its hegemonic ambitions. Fulfilling those ambitions requires the continued work of the Quds Force, training Shia militias in Iraq, funneling funds and arms to Syria's Bashar al-Assad, and supporting the Houthi fighters in Yemen. And incredibly, the Iran deal delists and lifts certain sanctions from some of the same people leading these very actions, including the current Quds Force Commander Soleimani and the former Quds Force Commander and Defense Minister Vahidi. And as we know, he is wanted by Interpol for his role in the AMIA Jewish Community Center bombings in Buenos Aires. As a matter of fact, almost half of the entire nuclear agreement is pages and pages of delisting of individuals, of companies, and vessels from the U.S. or EU sanctions list. The second organization that will benefit enormously from sanctions relief is one of the world's most dangerous and capable terror organizations, Hezbollah. Trained, equipped, and funded by the Quds Force, Hezbollah is said to be responsible for some of the world's most infamous terror attacks, including the 1983 U.S. Marine barracks bombing in Beirut, the AMIA Jewish Community Center, which I just referenced, and the 1996 Khobar Towers bombing, just to name a few. A stronger Hezbollah undermines our interest in Lebanon, where that fragile country continues to grapple with internal strife, and its forces are deeply involved and critically important to Iranian efforts in Syria, helping Iran to prop up Assad and prolonging the chaos, the destruction, the tragedy that is spreading further and further outside the borders of Syria. Hezbollah's leader recently reaffirmed the terror organization's ideological partnership with Iran, saying that the nuclear deal would not stop Iran from providing it material and financial support. And now that we've lifted Iran's arms embargo and ballistic missile sanctions, Hezbollah will soon be able to obtain even more sophisticated weaponry in order to carry out operations like the one we recently saw with the terror cell in Kuwait. Sanctions relief from the Iranian deal will not only free up resources for Iran to spend more on Assad, It will allow Hezbollah to extricate itself from Syria, where its forces have been bogged down, and return to its focus of its top priority and target, the democratic Jewish state of Israel. The possibility that Hezbollah will launch attacks against Israel is increasingly likely thanks to the Iran deal and Iran's increasingly capability to provide assistance and advanced weaponry. We must consider the impact of both direct and indirect sanctions relief from the Iran deal and what these additional resources will do for the Iranian regime's next steps in the region, including what it will do for the capabilities of Iran's proxies like Hezbollah and the consequences for our own interest and the interest of our allies. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on exactly who and which entities stand to gain the most from this disastrous agreement, what we can expect next from the IRGC and Hezbollah, and what we here in Congress can do to prevent this from happening. So pleased to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Deutsch of Florida.